Before every NBA season, every player and team has certain expectations that they expect to meet, whether it be regarding wins, individual production, improvement in certain regards, and any combination of those categories. Based on previous production, their roles within their team, and expected improvement, they all have a standard they need to live up to, or else, in the eyes of the fans and the media, their season will be a disappointment. For the topic of today's video, we'll be discussing 6 players that, to varying degrees, had hefty expectations, but so far have fallen well below it, whether it be the numbers they're putting up, the lack of development, or any other kind of struggles. They're just not having the seasons many expected them to have. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player up on this list that came in with lofty expectations but has fallen flat is Mike Conley of the Utah Jazz. The Jazz over the last 2 seasons have built a very solid foundation for contention led by Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and the role players around those two have helped solidify one of the best defenses in the league, year in and year out. However, the one thing that remained blatantly obvious come playoff time is that they needed more offensive firepower and playmaking to both take some pressure off of Mitchell and open things up even more for the players around them. This is where Conley was seen as a perfect fit for the team's needs, and this summer, when they landed him, the Jazz were looking like a team ready to make a ton of noise with one of the best backcourts in the league. However, we're now 2/3 of the way through the season, and Conley just has not looked like himself at all. He's always been incredibly underrated throughout his career, and many argue he's the best player that hadn't made an All-Star game over the last 5 years, but this year, he hasn't even been worthy of being in All-Star consideration because he's having arguably the worst year of his career. His scoring has fallen off a cliff, only averaging 13.5 per game. His efficiency is shockingly bad as he shoots 39% from the field, and his impact on the floor as a floor general is just not what it used to be in his time with the Grizzlies. He has started to find his groove in the last few weeks, so that is a good sign for the future, and he could still turn it around for a playoff push, but overall on the season as a whole, he's struggled mightily, making him a disappointment to many. Next up on this list of players disappointing those that had high hopes for them is Al Horford of the Philadelphia 76ers. This summer, the Sixers were one of the more intriguing teams of the offseason because the moves they made after the season they just had were pretty interesting. A lot of controversy came when they chose to not go all in on Jimmy Butler, instead opting to go a different route, and at the head of this new direction was the team signing Al Horford to a big max contract. Horford had been the centerpiece of the Celtics for a few years, and every time he matched up with Joel Embiid, he gave him fits on defense. So the rationale here was that if they add their franchise player's biggest competition, they not only make life easier on him, but they also shore up their defense. Additionally, the team's backup center position was one of the team's biggest weaknesses last season, and in the playoffs, it was more apparent than ever when Embiid would go to the bench and the team's net rating would crumble. However, while this theory was good in your head, the cons that came with it have been much greater. For one, Horford's not nearly as impactful as a power forward, and he's been thrust into that position in order to play alongside Embiid. On top of that, his three-point shot has been terribly inconsistent, and he's shooting worse from deep than he ever has. The Sixers' spacing was already an issue because they lack the role players that fit around Simmons and Embiid, and lineups with both Horford and Embiid on the court have been very problematic. The team is now shaking things up and bringing him off the bench, which I believe is an amazing and much needed change, and it could bring out the best of both Horford and the rest of the team, with him being used in a smaller role, but on top of all of these things, he has still disappointed. Up next on this list of players disappointing big time this season is Blake Griffin of the Detroit Pistons. When the Pistons traded for Griffin at the trade deadline 2 seasons ago, they had big goals that they wanted to achieve, with Griffin and Andre Drummond leading the way as one of the best front court duos in the league, Last year, we saw Griffin play some of the best basketball ever, and he led the team to a playoff spot, which was a pretty good start, but unfortunately there were some foreshadowing of the future as Griffin played through injuries in the playoffs. In the offseason, he spent a lot of time rehabbing and trying to get back to full strength to carry the momentum that they had in last year's season into this season, but then he suffered a setback early on with his knee and his hamstring, and from there, his long history with injuries started to take a toll on him. He missed the first 10 games of the season, and when he came back, he just didn't look like the Blake Griffin we've come to know on the court at all. He's only averaging 15 points and 5 rebounds per game, and his efficiency is horrendous. But it was clear that he never got back to full strength, so he opted to have surgery on his knee, thus ending his season. This is the one player on the list whose disappointment more so stems from the fact that injuries have prevented him from being the player that he's capable of being. It's something that's out of his control, and it's so upsetting that it came to this, because now his best days very well may be behind him. Next up on this list of players that have disappointed a good bit this season is Gary Harris of the Denver Nuggets. Harris's career has been pretty interesting, because when he first came into the league, he wasn't really expected to be much of a contributor, but then by his third year, he looked like someone capable of being one of the best 3-and-D guys in the entire league, and in year 4, he had the best season of his career, posting averages of 17.5 points while shooting a highly efficient 49% from the field and 40% from 3. He was the perfect third option for a young, up-and-coming Nuggets team that played a fun brand of basketball led by Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. However, since that season, Harris's production has regressed. Last year, he admittedly struggled with injuries, but this year, many hoped he would return to being a high-level third option, and instead has regressed even further. He's scoring the fewest amount of points he's posted since his rookie season, when he barely played at all. His three-point shot has been disastrous at 29%, and at times, his confidence just doesn't look like it's there. The thing is, though, that the Nuggets are still very much in contention at the top of the West, currently in second place in the conference, and that's with Harris struggling. With about a third of the season left to play, if he starts to turn things up a notch, they'll be even more dangerous, but based solely on what we've seen so far, he's fallen well short of expectations. Next up on this list is the youngest player on this list, so the degree to which he's disappointed is much different, but it's Mo Bamba of the Orlando Magic. Back at the time of the 2018 NBA draft, Bamba was easily the most intriguing big man in the class, and believe it or not, many thought he had the highest upside of all. DeAndre Ayton was seen as the most ready for the league, and someone with very little chance of busting as a big man because of his already polished post-game, face-up game, strength, and agility, but Bamba's length, combined with his ability to block shots and move his feet, had people thinking that one day he could develop into the perfect modern-day big man. He was drawing comparisons to Rudy Gobert, and while Gobert didn't dominate right away either, he did show strong progress and earn a strong role early on, which Bamba still has yet to do. After a rookie season where he made little noise, nobody was panicking because rookie seasons are always things you have to take with a grain of salt, but by year 2, they should make some sort of step forward. But for Bamba, his production has somehow regressed from an already minuscule numbers he was putting up a year ago. He's playing fewer minutes, scoring fewer points, and shooting worse from the field. He has shown that he can block shots at a high level, but the rest of his game is not developing as quickly as we probably hoped. And finally, the sixth and final player we'll discuss in this video that has disappointed this season is Lauri Markkanen of the Chicago Bulls. Markkanen was a lottery pick back in 2017 and immediately as a rookie showed off a diverse offensive skill set that had fans and analysts alike salivating over the potential he had in him to develop in the future. His ability to handle the ball and shoot from deep as a big man gave him a unique edge over his competition at his position, and like Kristaps Porzingis was referred to as a unicorn. He went from scoring 15 points per game as a rookie to almost 19 as a sophomore, so then going into his third year this season, the belief was that he was ready to step into stardom and help the Bulls go to a playoff spot, especially with Zach LaVine playing as well as he's been and the team signing good veterans like Thad Young to help the young core win games. In reality though, Markkanen's having the worst season he's had as a pro, with his numbers across the board decreasing and his shot being even more inconsistent than it was previously. There are tons of complaints with the system head coach Jim Boylen has implemented, and rightfully so, because he has definitely not been a great coach by any means, but ultimately, Markkanen simply has to play better. He still has a bright future ahead of him, but we'll have to wait a little longer to see him break out and reach that potential. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below any other players you believe have disappointed this season. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.